Hey guys, in this episode we're going to tackle the age-old problem of outlining hair. Hey guys, welcome to Kelvin Designs. My name is Calvin in Design, and that's why it's called Kelvin Designs. Click right here to subscribe to my YouTube channel and get all these tutorials just as they come out on YouTube. And click right here to subscribe to my newsletter and get all the goodies, raw files for this episode and every other tutorial that I do for free. So in this episode, we're actually taking a lesson out of my course, the Masking and Extraction Masterclass, which you can see right here. And in this course, I basically go over all the techniques of outlining, selecting, so that you can do composites and whatnot. And this lesson is specifically on how to outline complex elements such as hair perfectly. It's really simple, but you have to know how to do it. So let me show you. All right, let's take a look at the refine edges. So to start, let's right click on here and open with, let's do Photoshop. And it goes through the camera raw. Right now I'm just going to keep it really the defaults. And here we go. All right, I use Command plus to zoom in a little bit. And we just want to get a basic selection here. So I'm going to actually use the quick selection tool here. And I'm actually going to zoom out just a notch. And I'm just going to add the background here. Try to get a decent selection, all right? Nothing too detailed, because that's what we'll use the refine edges. I use the Alt key as I showed in the previous video. I'm essentially redoing somewhat rapidly the last selection I did in the last video. So something like this. And then I'm going to add all this down here. Okay, I picked it up all the way here. Nice clean edge over here. Okay, and I got, you see there's still gray in here, but right now all the soft edges is fine. What I want to keep, I want to make sure I have the basic selection around here. Okay, so I'm going to actually invert my selection, Command Shift I, or if you want to do it through the menu, you go to select menu, and you have inverse right here. And it's Control Shift I on PC. All right, now when you're within any selection tool, whether it's the lasso, the mark key, or quick selection, magic wand, or anything like that, here you have this little button that says Refine Edge. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. I click it, and it brings up this little menu here, which is the Refine Edges tool. And what it does is, as the name suggests, it is something that perfects the edge of your selection. So as you can see here right now, it's a very hard edge, doesn't look good. All right, and you can actually view this in different modes. Right now it's on black, and I try to go on something that's the least forgiving, meaning something that looks the worst, because that means I can really get the best type of selection. In some cases I actually put a green layer behind my layer, and then I do on layers right here, but since this is a background, there's nothing there, so that really won't work. So I'll do on white. On black is nicer, but I don't see as clearly. So let's just do that. And now what you want to do is, here you have this brush right here. So you have really two. You have one that erases and one that brushes, and you have your size over here. So right now the size of this brush is pretty small. What I wanted to do here is basically brush over everything that is semi-transparent, meaning there's holes in here, but this brush is a little too small. So let's go ahead and make this a little bigger, even bigger than that. It's a pretty high resolution image, so it's going to require a bigger brush. So here we go. I'm just going to go here and brush. And let go, and you'll see that it already starts. It says, oh, well, here, look, I found a bunch of pixels that I think should be transparent. And you keep doing that over here. I usually do it in one brush stroke over the whole thing. And everywhere where there is a little bit of hair and transparency, see, look at that, it's magic. All right, and I mean, that's pretty amazing. Anybody who's been doing outlines like I have since the mid-90s can testify that this is pretty incredible. Anywhere where I see a little bit, I'll go and fix it up. The Refine Edge tool for me is really just for this. I do not really like using it for hard edges, as you see down here. While you can manipulate edges and so on, it's really that is not why I use it. And I recommend other methods that we will get into. But for now, let's just take a look at the hair and outlining that hair, because this is a lot of detail that doing this manually somehow would just, it's basically impossible. Let's take a look on black, see how it looks. Looks pretty good. I got a few. So here I can see, okay, well here I got a little bit. Should clean it up in here as well. Okay. So even though the white was less forgiving, the black still reveals a few things that I would not have seen otherwise. So I go back and forth between black and white to make sure that's really nice and clean. And like I said, sometimes I will actually have a green layer, which is actually pretty nice. You can do the overlay mode. That kind of shows you, well, look at that, I'm missing this hair. So let's try this. Boop, got that. Okay. And I go back to on black. Pretty clean. I mean, if this is actually going to be black, I would have to adjust the colors because this was taken on a gray background. And that means that some of the gray is still showing. And if it was black, well, this would be darker. So you would actually have to darken these semi-transparent pixels for it to actually work nicely. And we'll get into a little more advanced blending for extraction, meaning when you do this kind of selection, how do you make it merge perfectly no matter what the background? And we'll get into that's a little more advanced, and it's in a few videos, a little later. For now, let's just get into some basic. Let's finish this refine edges, and I really want to see how I can get as maximum detail on this. And on white, I mean, it's pretty incredible. All right, let's take a look at a few of these options. You got the smart radius. What this means is, right now it has a radius of, it's calculating how far in or out can I go on the selection. And smart radius means that you can basically, it'll change. It's not just doing the same radius all around. It says, well, here it needs to be finer, here it needs to be thicker, for example. And as you can see, when I turn this off, well, you actually didn't see it. It was when I turned it back on, suddenly some of these fine hairs showed up. All right, then you have the smooth. Smooth is basically, I'm going to bring it up just so you can see what it does. It softens all the edges, and it's not good for hair. It's really not good for hair. It's good for a sharp edge, like if you're outlining a pear or something like that. You know, the curves need to be nice and round. Like, I mean, like, look at his sweater. His sweater looks better. And if I take it back, the smoothness, and now it's all jagged. So smooth, I do not recommend for anything that's hair, and I really use the refine edge tool for fine selection like hair or fur or you know, animals and so on. So very fine detail. Then you have the feather, which basically feathers, meaning it softs as if you did a Gaussian blur on the selection. And again, I don't really recommend. It's basically you're softening it, so you're getting rid of all your detail. I prefer to have as much detail as you can. If you cannot have detail because there's a lack of contrast, meaning his hair is black and the background was black, and you can't get away without softening it, then you have to feather a little bit. And then contrasting basically means it's going to have a stronger edge between what's selected and not. So as you can see here, there's no fine details. It's too high a contrast. So again, I leave that as low as possible. The shift edge, however, I like this very much. This basically says I'm going to eat into my selection or I'm going to expand my selection. Generally speaking, I have this on 0, and it's a pretty good compromise. And if anything, I usually eat in a little bit. I'm like, you know, there's a little too much. For example, if we look on the black and go back to 0, you'll see that there's some gray spots in there, right? Or semi-gray spots. If we eat into these pixels a little bit, you see that the more we go in, the more it's taking up those pixels. However, we are losing quite a bit of information, and you can see it here on the white. I prefer to keep this as close to reality as possible, meaning 0. And if you need to, because if you have a black background, adjust this in a different way, which, like I said, we'll get into a little later. If this was photographed on, say, a green background, as a green screen or something like that, you would still see green in the hair because it's not doesn't take out the color. It's trying to find intelligently the edge, but you would still see green reflections. So you have decontaminate colors. And because we're on a gray background, you shouldn't see a difference at all. Now, something to note, however, when you do decontaminate colors, it creates a new layer with the layer mask, as opposed to traditionally a selection. Meaning when I hit OK here, it's going to take me out of this. I'm still going to have my background, but I'm going to have the marching ants that basically tell me I have a selection. So that is, for me, the optimum, as opposed to a new layer that now has like a change in color and so on. All right. And as we go along, I'll show you more examples so that that becomes a little clearer. But just so you know, I want the result I want from this tool is a selection that I can now have as a layer mask, which I'll get to in a second. All right, so here we go. I have all the refine edges is good. I'm going to hit OK, and here we go. My marching ants. I have a selection. Okay, so I haven't really gone into layer masks, and it's very important. The difference between a layer mask and a mask. Traditionally, masks are held into channels. So if I went here and said select, save selection, and I'll call this Steven, hit OK. Here we go. I get a mask in my channel, which is actually another channel, also called an alpha channel, and it's called Steven because that's what I just called it. And it didn't change anything in my layers. All right. If I take this selection and I hit this little layer mask button, all right, if it says add a mask, if I stay over it, it's going to convert. It did a couple of things. It converted my background layer into layer 0. Background layers cannot have transparency, and you cannot actually manipulate them in many ways that you can a layer. So it converted it to a layer, and then it added a mask here. And the good thing about adding a mask to a layer mask, as opposed to erasing, is that if I change my mind, I say, you know what, I want that background, I'm going to disable this layer mask. None of these pixels are actually gone. It's all there, so it's non-destructive. So I'm going to enable this layer mask. And now let's say I want to add another layer, put it below this layer, and I'm going to put some green in here. I'm going to go ahead and fill, and let's do foreground color. Hit OK. Okay, so I got this green layer in the background, and I have Steven in the front here. Let's just rename this layer Steven. And you actually can't really see the gray. That green really pops up, but there's a few areas where you're like, ooh, you know, it looks like he has green hair here. So we can still adjust this. The good thing with the layer mask is that I can still adjust it. I'll get into a little more layer mask adjustments a little later, because it's a little more advanced. And for now, I want you to understand the simplicity of quick selection, refine edge, and now I can put anything in the background. Let's do an easier example. Well, it's not necessarily easier, but a little more interesting. Let's do a gradient here, and I'm just going to create a gradient here of a weird sort of a sky and desert background. Anyway, just to give you, just to show you how clean this selection process is. I mean, this is really good. You will definitely, in the upcoming videos, see a more advanced procedure where you can get even more detail and even better blending. But for now, this is actually pretty cool. All right, so that was the refine edges. And one last thing I wanted to show you is, so I'm going to actually create another layer here. I'm just going to Command J, which makes a copy, and hide this one. I'm going to apply this layer mask. So now I've taken out the information. And if there was, so I'm going to go here and fill it with black. So I hit D for default colors, and then Option Delete to fill. Okay, you see how there's a little bit of white here, and well, we don't actually have too much white around here, but if you do have sometimes a little 1 pixel white, you can do what's called matting, and that's actually pretty simple. You go into Layer, go to matting, and you have 3 different options. You have defringe, remove black matte, remove white matte. So if you were to have a little white pixel around here, you could go in here and say remove white matte, and you see how it just kind of got rid of all the white that was kind of making the blend very harsh or very difficult. Now it did take some of the detail away, but I mean it got rid of all that sort of white matting. All right, and let's go back into the history. Another way you can do this is defringe. So here, matting, defringe, and essentially I'm saying cut in about 1 pixel. Well, in this case, 1 pixel. Let's do 2. I could click OK. See, it just cut everything in, and it's similar to. I'm going to just load the selection real quick. It's in the refine edges. Remember how we have the shift edge? That defringe is very similar to cutting in here. So I'm basically cutting in by 1 or 2 pixels. Here it's percentage, but in the defringe it was a pixel. So deselect that. I'm not going to keep this. So bring this back, and there you go. Just as a quick note, for some of you who are not used to this is not the default. I should probably have said this a little earlier. This is transparent, and by default in Photoshop in your preferences, you have the transparency grid, and it looks like this. It probably looks like this in your computer if you're following along. I actually prefer to have white or none. This kind of distracts me a little bit from the fine detail, and I know by looking at here I can see I already know which is transparent or not. So this is a personal preference. If you prefer to have the transparency grid, you can go ahead and do that. I just wanted to make a note of it because by default you do have the transparency grid. Alright guys, well I hope you liked this episode and I hope you learned something. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the like button on YouTube, and it really helps me out if you share it on Facebook or Google+. And if you do want me to do a tutorial on something specific, leave a comment below and I will do it. I'll see you in the next episode.